They didn't notice us at first. That's always how it begins. The galaxy had been alive for millions of years before we ever pointed a radio antenna at the sky, and by the time we reached the stars ourselves, it already belonged to someone else, not ruled, not conquered, but organized, catalogued, filed away into neat layers of power, age, and assumed importance. Humanity arrived late, breathing hard, ships still smelling of welded metal and burnt propellant, carrying the kind of ambition that comes from knowing you're behind and hating every second of it. The first contact reports described us as energetic but fragile. That phrase would follow us for decades. Energetic but fragile. We were invited into councils we didn't yet understand, given trade routes we couldn't fully protect, and praised for our creativity in the same tone one might use for a clever animal. They admired our art, our music, our strange habit of naming ships instead of numbering them. They laughed at how emotional our diplomats were, how easily we smiled, how quickly we bonded. What they didn't laugh at was how fast we learned. At the time, none of that mattered. Humanity was too busy trying not to tear itself apart as it spread across a few dozen systems. We fought wars with ourselves, signed treaties we didn't fully trust, and built fleets that were always one budget cut away from obsolescence. We were loud, argumentative, inefficient, and painfully aware that every major power in the galaxy could crush us if it wanted to. That knowledge shaped everything we did, from ship design to doctrine, to the quiet clauses buried deep in defense agreements. And then came the Keled Accords. The Keled were old, not ancient like the myths whispered about the vanished precursors, but old enough that their borders had solidified long before humanity discovered electricity. Their fleets were elegant, grown rather than built, hulls layered like coral, energy signatures calm and steady, the kind that came from centuries of refinement. They didn't conquer worlds so much as absorb them, promising protection, stability, and a place in something larger. Most species accepted. Some resisted. None ever won. When the Keled extended their influence toward human-controlled space, it was framed as an opportunity, shared security, economic integration, mutual defense. The language was smooth, practiced, reassuring. Human diplomats smiled, nodded, and asked for time. That was our first mistake. The second came 3 years later, when a human mining colony on the edge of the Orpheus Reach went dark. No distress call, no debris, just silence where 10,000 lives had been. The Keled expressed regret, deep regret, an unfortunate misunderstanding involving patrol zones and autonomous enforcement units. Compensation was offered. Apologies were recorded. The Council moved on. Humanity did not. The official investigation was slow, tangled in committees and jurisdictional disputes, but the unofficial one moved faster. Black boxes were found months later, cracked open in secret labs, showing images that never reached the Council floor. Keled enforcement ships had fired without warning, not by accident, not in confusion, deliberately, efficiently, and without hesitation. The colony had been erased because it was inconvenient. Still, humanity said nothing, not publicly. Instead, shipyards expanded, training programs changed. The language in fleet manuals grew colder, more precise. The emphasis shifted from deterrence to endurance. Human engineers began asking uncomfortable questions about failure states, about how long a ship could keep fighting after losing power, after losing atmosphere, after losing half its crew. Admirals started running simulations that assumed every ally would abandon them at the first sign of real danger. The galaxy saw none of this. It saw humans attending summits, contributing to joint patrols, arguing passionately about trade tariffs and cultural preservation. Energetic, but fragile. Always energetic, always fragile. Until the day the Keled crossed the line they didn't know existed. It happened in the Eos Corridor, a narrow chain of systems that served as the primary artery between human space and the broader galactic network. The Keled declared it a security concern. Piracy, they said. Instability. For the greater good, Keled fleets would assume control of traffic regulation until matters were resolved. Human ships were asked to comply, most did. One didn't. The civilian transport Meridian Dawn was old even by human standards, its hull patched and repatched, its drives whining like an injured animal. It carried refugees from a border world destabilized by Keled expansion, families who had believed human promises of asylum. When Keled patrol vessels ordered it to halt and submit to inspection, the captain refused. He cited human law, human jurisdiction, human responsibility to the people on board. The Keled fired. They didn't vaporize the ship. That would have drawn too much attention. Instead, they disabled its engines and left it drifting, power failing, life support bleeding away into vacuum. By the time a human rescue flotilla arrived, 600 people were dead. This time, the recordings leaked. Not through official channels, not through diplomatic briefings. They spread the old-fashioned way, through encrypted networks, whispered transfers, raw footage passed from one human to another, images of frozen bodies, of children strapped into acceleration couches that would never move again, of a captain's final log, his voice calm as he apologized for failing to protect his passengers. The Galaxy reacted with discomfort. Some expressed concern, others urged restraint. The Kaled stood firm, citing protocol and necessity. Humanity went silent. For 3 weeks, there were no statements, no condemnations, no emergency sessions. Human ambassadors withdrew from public appearances. Fleets returned to port. Trade slowed. Analysts across the galaxy speculated wildly, most concluding that humans, once again, would grieve loudly and then adapt. They always did. On the 22nd day, a single human ship entered the Eos corridor. It wasn't large by galactic standards. It wasn't elegant. It didn't broadcast any threats or declarations. Its hull was dark, angular, scarred with micrometeor impacts and repair seams. Its name was painted in simple white letters along the flank, UNS Resolute. The Kaled patrol commander ordered it to halt. The Resolute did not respond. A second order followed, sharper, backed by targeting locks and the low hum of charged weapons. The Resolute continued forward, engines burning hot, trajectory steady, as if the Keled ships weren't there at all. When the first warning shot crossed its path, the Resolute finally transmitted. The message was short, untranslated, human languages layered over one another, spoken voices instead of synthesized calm. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a demand, it was a statement. We are done asking. Then the Resolute opened fire. Human weapons had always been considered crude, excessively kinetic, wasteful. Where other species favored precision energy systems and elegant force fields, humans still believed in mass, velocity, and redundancy. What the Kaled patrol commander saw on his tactical display made no sense at first. A cloud of objects accelerating toward his ships, each one small, unremarkable, easily intercepted. They weren't missiles, they were slugs. Tungsten rods, dumb and brutal, fired in such numbers that point defenses choked trying to track them all. Shields flared and failed under impacts they had never been designed to absorb. Keled ships buckled, hulls fracturing, grown structures shattering like brittle bone. One ship lost half its mass in the first salvo. Another spun helplessly, internal compartments venting into space. The Resolute didn't slow. It plowed through the wreckage, weapons cycling, engines screaming, taking hits that would have crippled other ships and continuing anyway. Its armor burned and peeled away, revealing more armor beneath. Systems failed and rerouted. Crew members died at their stations, and the ship kept fighting. By the time Keled reinforcements arrived, the patrol was gone, not disabled, gone. The galaxy exploded with reaction. Emergency sessions were called, borders closed, fleets mobilized. The Keled issued a declaration of hostilities, framing the attack as unprovoked aggression. Human representatives did not deny it. Instead, the human ambassador stood before the council and spoke without notes, her voice steady, her expression carved from something harder than anger. "You erased our people," she said. "You tested our patience. You mistook our restraint for weakness. This ends now." The council demanded explanation, demanded justification. demanded assurances that this would not escalate into full war. The ambassador listened, nodded, and then delivered the line that would be replayed across 1,000 worlds. "We didn't come here to win a war. We came here to finish one you started." Within hours, human fleets moved. Not toward Keled core worlds, not toward population centers. They moved toward infrastructure, choke points, relay hubs, shipyards that fed the endless Keled expansion machine. They struck fast, hard, and without hesitation, appearing in systems the Keled believed secure, hitting targets that had never been fortified because no one had ever dared. Human ships died by the hundreds. The galaxy watched in shock as fragile humanity threw itself into the jaws of a power that had crushed far stronger foes. Analysts predicted collapse within weeks. They were wrong. Human doctrine didn't seek quick victory. It sought to hurt, to disrupt, to exhaust. Human fleets didn't retreat when outmatched. They broke apart, vanished into deep space, and returned somewhere else entirely. They fought dirty, using asteroid fields, stellar flares, even debris clouds as weapons. They lured Keled fleets into chasing ghosts, stretching supply lines thinner and thinner, and everywhere they went, they broadcast. Not propaganda, not boasts, names, the names of destroyed colonies, the names of dead civilians, the names of ships like Meridian Dawn. Each strike carried a reminder, etched into hull plating or encoded into transmission bursts, impossible to ignore. The Keled adapted, as they always had. They reinforced. They countered. They learned to anticipate human tactics. Then humanity changed again. The first Keled world fell not to bombardment, but to silence. Human ships bypassed defenses and deployed devices no one had seen before. Machines that sank into planetary networks and simply turned them off. Power grids failed. Communications died. Automated systems shut down. Cities went dark without a single building destroyed. Panic spread faster than fire ever could. Human troops landed days later, not as conquerors, but as executioners of policy. They dismantled Keled governance structures piece by piece, arrested officials responsible for expansion directives, and transmitted their trials live across the galaxy. No secrecy, no summary executions. Every charge documented, every crime laid bare. For the first time in centuries, the Keled were forced to look at themselves through someone else's eyes. The war dragged on for years. Systems changed hands, species chose sides or fled. Humanity paid a price that would scar generations. Entire fleets were lost. Worlds burned. Names were added to the broadcasts, human names now mixed with alien ones, a grim ledger of cost. But something had shifted. Other species began to notice that wherever human fleets passed, they left something behind. Not occupation, not exploitation. They left space, breathing room. Former Keled client worlds found themselves suddenly free to choose their own paths. Some aligned with humanity, others didn't. Humans didn't force the issue. That, more than any weapon, terrified the old powers. When the final confrontation came, it wasn't in a blaze of glory at the Keled capital. It was in a quiet system, far from any major population center, where the last intact Keled Grand Fleet made its stand. Hundreds of ships, ancient and proud, forming a wall of living metal. Human fleets arrived in silence. No speeches, no broadcasts, just engines flaring in the dark. The battle lasted 12 hours. It was brutal, chaotic, and unlike anything the galaxy had recorded. Keled ships fought with desperation born of extinction, human ships with the cold focus of those who had already accepted the cost. When it ended, the system was filled with wreckage and drifting bodies, and the Keled Grand Fleet was no more. Humanity did not pursue the remnants. Instead, they stopped. They transmitted a final message, not to the Keled alone, but to everyone. We didn't come to rule you. We didn't come to replace you. We came to make sure no one ever does this again. The Keled surrendered days later. In the aftermath, historians would argue endlessly about whether humanity had saved the galaxy or destabilized it forever. They would debate ethics, tactics, and the terrifying precedent set by a species that refused to accept its assigned place. But among those who had watched it unfold, who had seen human ships burn and keep moving, who had heard the names and understood the meaning behind them. There was no confusion. Humanity had never been fragile. It had been restrained. And when that restraint finally broke, the galaxy learned the most dangerous truth of all. Humans don't fight to conquer. They fight to end things. And once they start, they don't stop until there's nothing left that can ever threaten them again.